Alrighty, folks, today we are talking about using lists with for loops. So last class we discussed what lists are in general and how to transform strings and tuples into lists. Today let's look at using for loops to interact with lists. So let's remember, what does the range function do when I give it one parameter? If I say for I in range 5, print I, what am I going to see?
Like what that sort of one's going to say.
Yeah, what is this output going to be from this loop? For I in range 5, print I. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Absolutely correct. So we are going to see 5 numbers on screen. And what are the indices of a list with 5 elements? So what is the index of the first element in my list? Remember back to our day we discussed tuples, we said that each element in a list or in a tuple has an index. It's the place where we can find that thing. And we're going to start counting our indices at 0. So our first index is going to be 0. Our next index is going to be 1, etc. So it's going to increase by 1 each time through or across our list. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And if we look, those lists of numbers match each other. They both have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in them. So let's apply that. Let's say my list is A, B, C, D, E. And then for I in range 5, we're going to print my list at index I. So what do we think we are going to print here? I have my list equaling A, B, C, D, E. For I in range 5, print my list at index I.
A, B, C, D, E.
We will see A, B, C, D, and E each on their own line because we're grabbing each index one at a time from our list. Now, what if my list were to become longer or shorter? What if I added another element to the end here? Is this still going to work and show me every element in the list?
No.
No, because I'm only looping 5 times. So what we can do to fix that problem is we can use the length of the list to determine how many times we actually want to loop. So instead of always saying 5, I can use the length of my list. And remember, len will tell me how many elements there are. So what is the len of my list now? How many elements are there in this list?
6.
6. And when I do for I in range 6, my indices or my values in I are going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which happen to still correspond to the indices of my list. So this will give me now all of my elements in my list, no matter how long my list is. So this is super helpful when I want to look at each index and then find every element at that index. There is, however, an alternative kind of loop where instead of looping over the indices for a list, we can loop over the elements themselves. So if my list is now A, B, C, D, E, or is still A, B, C, D, E, I can say for element in my list. So instead of having a range here, now we're just saying we want to loop for each thing in my list, in my collection of things. So for each thing, we're gonna print that thing. So this is also gonna print A, B, C, D, E. An element is gonna equal A, and then element is gonna equal B, and then element is gonna equal C, etc. Our element variable is gonna equal each of the individual elements from my list, one after the other. Does that make sense how we can use that other type of loop? Cool. Now, if I want to do both of those types of loops at once, I can use the enumerate function. And what this does is it's going to make us two loop variables here. One is going to store the index, and one is going to store the element at that index. And enumerate will fill in both of them each time through the loop. So the syntax for this, we're going to have our list, and I can say for I, comma, element, so for these two variables in enumerate my list, this is going to populate I and element both at the same time with the corresponding value. So the first time through the loop, I is going to start at 0, just like normal. Element is going to be our 0th value within the list. So we'll see 0, A. Then our next time through the loop, both values are going to go up. So I is going to become 1. Element is going to go to the next element in the list. We will get B. So we'll get 1B. And so on. Our I is going to increase, and our element is going to look at each value through the list. And this is useful for when I want to access both the index and the element at the same time, because then I don't have to grab from my list at that index. I can just say, I want this element. So this makes interacting with our lists just a little bit easier. So if we care about both index and element at once, we can do that with one loop. Does that idea make sense? All right. Bonus question. What do you think will be printed in this scenario if my list equals 1, 2, 3, 4 for each number in my list? Num equals num plus 5. What will happen when I print my list? What will we see?
Less than 7, 8, 9.
All right, we could see 6, 7, 8, 9. What else could we see? Or do we think that's the right answer? All right, this is a bit of a trick question. We will actually see 1, 2, 3, 4 still. And this is because when I am doing this style of loop, when I'm doing a for each thing in my list, this variable isn't actually going to be referencing this piece of data. So changing this variable will not change the contents of my list. So I can do whatever I want to num inside of my loop, and my list will be completely unchanged. If I want to actually change my list, I would need to say my list at a given index equals some value. You need to manually say my list at an index equals a new value. Just changing that variable is not going to have any effect on your list as a whole. Just keep that in mind as you are working on assignments. All right. That is our lesson for today.